We in Global TV says certain kind of friend we no cape, and some informer friend we lovely. We in Global, bona fake friend and bona tape. We in Global, we not promote them, we not support them. Look at them on the cheek, come here represent for. We in Global TV, check it.
Good evening from a very tired person. Good evening and welcome to you all. Thank you very much for joining the Global Television Group this evening. Thank you all. Good evening to all my family members and my community of parity. Good evening to the people of the United Kingdom, London, and the West Midlands in particular. Good evening to all my globalists around the world. Good evening all, and welcome moderators, platform membership holders, viewers and subscribers, commenters. Good evening all, and welcome to the people's point of view. Thank you all for joining us. Sunshine, Prof. Gorgeous Lady Debbie Jervis, Yvonne Riley, Dora Morris, Camilla McNeil, Lilith Foster, Shauna Smith, Beat and Teach, Donnet, Elaine Turner, Natalia Freeman, Tash, Kate M. Who else is here? Mary Messenger TV, good evening and welcome. Thank you all for joining us. Vernon Mitchell, Joan Bailey. Just bear with me, my system is a bit slow. Head Teacher K, good evening and welcome. Thank you for joining us. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome. Today, exactly, has been 11 years since my mom died, or mom, rather, died. And ironically, I was at a funeral today. Those of you who may know, I was streaming professionally. I made it through the day, not crying, especially being at a funeral. It was emotional and tough being at a funeral on a day like today, but I've made it through. But our mom had different relationship with all of us. It's 9 of us. The two eldest are separate dads, and the other 7 of us are for the same dad. We're from a very poor, humble background, but we had good upbringing. Even though our parents, our mom was dirt poor, but she always enforced education on us. She always wanted us to learn because our mom had the colonial disadvantage where they never had that education. So she always wanted her children to learn. So she always instilled those things in us. Even when our mom wasn't going to church, we have to go to church and Sunday school and all the other things. Our mom was loving, she was calm, but she was one of the most vile person you can ever come across. Mother Mouth was vile. If she's fighting, she's vile, but she's also a very nice, calm person. Of all the children, though, myself and Roger, when he's on the platform here, I am Roger Forbes, we have different, very close, and unique relationship with our mother, um, unlike any of the other children. I don't know if it's because both of us are the two last children. We had very unique and different relationship with our mother. She was more Roger fire chief, Roger gangster. She was more like my body and ride or die and gossip partner because me and mama yam our flesh off everybody when we want to. Even the rest of sibling them, me and mama will yam up them flesh. So me and mama have a different, unique relationship from the other children. So the relationship was with she and Roger as well. But uh, the truth is, for most of our life as siblings, we got on very well, and I would say live loving. Apart the two eldest brothers, they for years they had sibling rivalry as adults, not as children, but as adults. But for the rest of us, including them too, it was a good and loving relationship throughout the time up until like a year and a half before our mother died. Things to do with our mother, things start turning sour. And then when our mom died, things turned into a nasty, disgraceful brawl, which it leave me hanging and dangling even till now, because I don't think any of us, of the 9 of us, got any chance to grieve because there was that tension, there was that anger, the frustration, the anxiety, and I can talk about it because it happened in our community, in public. My God, I'm glad this happened in 2013. I'm glad it wasn't the days of this open social media, because what happened would have been a nasty disgrace to us in the public. But thank God, social media, as it exists today, did not exist then. Arlene Foster. But I know want Andrew thinks that because of this day, them never on a break. No. No. Nobody not on a break. Nobody don't on a break tonight. Andrew Wholeness. Michelle Lewis Wilson God gives Arlene Foster. Andrew will cry and get up and war with you, still go back, go cry. Angela 48349. What go on, my friend? JP. Vernon Mitchell. So, don't think you're safe, my friend. Mavis Gooden. Carly Jones. Thank you all for joining. I want to play for you 2 recordings regarding Chief Curry. One, very, very recent. Special, good evening and welcome. And the other from about 2 years ago, an interview that was done with All Angles. I don't know why they want to put up a short snippet of that interview. Real Black Woman, how are you? I don't know why they put up just a short snippet of that interview, but I'm going to play that interview for you. Then we play Chief Curry's current message. So I want you to all, let's listen together. Beverly Forbes, how are you? Arlene Forrest, how are you? I want us all to listen together to this interview, and then we'll come back to Chief Curry's recent message regarding the constitutional review.
Thank you so much for joining us for another edition of All Angles. I'm Dion Jackson Miller. No, we're not in studio today. That's because given the controversies of the past few weeks and indeed months about the Maroon communities and the government of Jamaica, how they relate to each other, given controversial statements made by a compound Chief Richard Curry, as well as Prime Minister Andrew Holness, we've come to a compound to talk to Chief Curry about issues in the public domain.
To peel a potato? To peel a potato,
Do the Maroons see themselves as Jamaicans?
The Maroons see themselves as the first peoples of the land, the indigenous people of the land. And we have been here forever, as far back as the records shows us. And we know when we talk about sovereignty, there are many definitions in using the word sovereignty. When we talk about sovereignty, we're talking about the freedom.
Just before you go on to, I just want to be clear.
Yes.
Because your response was that we see ourselves as indigenous people, the first people.
Right.
But in 2022,
yes,
Do you describe yourself as Jamaican? Do you see yourself as a part of the country of Jamaica, as citizens of Jamaica?
All right, let's put it this way. Again, if we're going to look at the dynamics of how history and time has progressed, right, we have understood the existence of a prior entity, a nation, that signed a treaty with the British, right? It's been said by the High Commissioner himself, who came here to reaffirm the status of that treaty, the standing of that treaty that was signed between two sovereign nations. These were his words, exactly. That's the previous British High Commissioner, Asif. And when we look at the definition in the freedom of the soil, we were always free people. We lived off our land. We essentially blossom from our land. And the saying, the earth is the Lord and the fullness thereof, right? We are nothing but a manifestation of this earth that we live on. We've always lived here. Our ancestors fought to defend it. And in years that have transcended since then, we have identified ourselves as these people, knowing the rights that we have, owning the land that we're on. So when we talk about sovereignty in its definition, it's the freedom, it's that which is derived from the freedom of this land.
And I want to explore that a little bit more, except that you're not answering me at all, Chief. But it's an easy question. Are you guys Jamaicans or not? Do you see yourselves as Jamaicans?
We are.
Okay. So let's talk then about sovereignty, because there have been a number of legal experts who have been analyzing the meaning of the word in terms of strict international law terms. Is this the phrase, for instance, that we've heard long before you, with the Maroons saying they belong to a state within a state, they're sovereign people? You know, those are words and phrases that are coming from decades.
Of course.
But what does it really mean? So we've had scholars such as constitutional expert Dr. Lloyd Barnett, Queen's Counsel, former Solicitor General Michael Hilton, Professor of International Law at UWI, Stephen Bassiani, saying, as far as international law is concerned, no, the Maroons are part of Jamaica. The community is part of Jamaica. It's not a separate state in the sense of being a separate country. So let me ask you to respond to that.
All right. So when it gets to the legalese, you know, we always try to avoid using certain terms which often confuses people, and that's why I like when I talk, I have the backative from the legal standing, and Dominic, which I introduced earlier, has also presented the different ideologies, looking and showing how this thing really operates. So we have known a formula, meaning how we operate as a autonomous people, and in terms of the confines of our space, these are things now which gets into a higher level conversation, because sovereignty also speaks to a definition of a boundary, and for long ages, we have always come to know specific territories and areas that are always and have always been Maroon lands, or sacred lands, right? As to a boundary and a definition of a boundary, those are challenges that today we still have to try and work out, because the language that has been presented isn't as clear-cut as one would think. So the treaty we've had several interpretations of what is the Maroon, and is it 1,500 acres? Because it says 1,500 acres bearing northwest of Trelawney Town. So let me ask them, how big was Trelawney Town? Trelawney Town was the original settlement. How big was the compound, which was a part of Trelawney Town? There are other conversations which haven't been brought forward in looking at this 1,500 acre allotment, which leads us to believe that this 1,500 acres is an increment to what was already understood to be in control and possession of the Maroon.
Chief Corey would have explained that at that time when the treaty was written, even though in today's modern interpretation some clauses may be repugnant, but at that time it was speaking of a time of war and slavery. Regardless of that fact, it also spoke about the freedom and liberties that shall last forever for the Maroon people. And then it also talked about, in perpetuity for the born and unborn. Within laws, let's say, even titleship, land patents, where it would say for your heirs and assigns forever. Someone has to look at this language and interpret it, because they would now be looking at who actually owns the fee simple absolute estate to know that if they're the actual true landlord of the land. Now, in this retrospect for the Maroons in that treaty, we would have to understand who is actually the landlord of these lands after the war, who controls these lands after the war. That's where sovereignty is being derived from. Because when the Crown sends their plenipotentiaries to a Kongpong to wave the white flag in order to say that they're coming to peace with the Maroon government so that peace may reign over the island again and commerce can continue. Because this was for 83 to 84 years that commerce was being disrupted. So we have to actually look, at history and law. They're not mutually exclusive, right? So that in today's modern society, we cannot forget the sovereignty, even though it may provoke people as we speak about it, because from the Roman Empire to many empires, the Ottoman Empire and such, sovereignty has been described in many different ways, of course, because governments rise and fall.
Which is why I'm asking you, in 2022,
Correct.
Just explain for me in simple terms what it means for you.
What it means for us is to be able to actually stand on our birthright in an essence where our situation as today, or what should have happened in 1962, as Chief Curry would have mentioned in that letter, that we can invoke that power to say that we need to come to the table if there is another government or another entity, whether de facto, quasi, etc., would have to now say, okay, what is this other entity, government, saying? Do they have the right? Do they have the authority? Do they have the sovereignty of the soil? These soils are not taxed. If they're not taxed and they have no titleship under the government of Jamaica, then how can it be the government of Jamaica's lands? This can easily clear it up if they make a phone call to the Crown, and if anybody has factual information or paperwork that they can bring to say otherwise, that should be brought forward so that this argument would be cleared up, where maybe you guys wouldn't be interviewing us, because then you would be saying that would be a waste of time.
I know you're speaking there about the concept of the Maroon land.
Yeah.
Which itself is something that, scholars have written on, scholars have studied. David Batts, for instance, wrote a whole article on Maroon lands and where it falls.
Right.
But the average Jamaican, I don't think, is thinking in those terms. They're thinking in terms of whether or not you all plan to take up guns and go fight JDF and take over Garden House and take over Jamaica House.
Right. But you see, that would not be the responsibility of the media to come and help.
It's our fault?
No, I didn't say that. No, I didn't say that. Well, I am saying that I'm going to be honest, what we have noticed.
Sorry, I'm going to let you answer that, but just respond specifically for me to what I said.
Yeah, go
because
ahead.
really and
Can you repeat
truly,
it again?
there are
Sorry.
people who think so and want to take over.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
That would be a very stupid decision from any responsible way to say that.
Do you want to put up barbed wire all around your borders and say nobody else can come in? This is a separate country.
This is a separate. No, I don't think that is what is going to happen. What should happen and must happen at this period in time, at this juncture, based on all the evidence, and at this point, the preponderance of evidence that can be brought forward in any court of law, but in the proper venue, that is what matters.
You use some of the words, for instance, that are causing the difficulty. Sovereignty is one, autonomy is another, another is self-determination.
Right.
And there are scholars who have said that, I interviewed some 2 weeks ago, who have said that when the Maroons speak of sovereignty, what they're speaking about is autonomy. What they're speaking about is the ability to determine their own fate and to run their own communities. But when we hear the leaders speak, it seems to contradict that.
Correct.
So let me ask you now, is it that you want to secede from Jamaica?
No, that is not. So this is it. That's why I say that there are levels in how you view sovereignty, right? There's the respect for the land and the territory, right? And as Maroons, we've always prided ourselves in maintaining, preserving, and living from our land, right? So when we talk about sovereignty, we talk about protecting those sacred lands, right? There are many areas in the cockpits that we lived, people still live. Our ancestors are actually buried in these lands, right? So for us, the argument of sovereignty is recognition of the space that we occupy, but also the identity that comes with it. This is not something that is new right? When you look at what happens with the tribal Indians in the United States and the relationship with the government, you see that they're models which actually recognizes the separateness of these people, but there are facilities and measures in place to allow the integration and mutually beneficial relationships of these two entities. So it's not something that is new or novel. It already exists. So what we're saying is knowing what our entitlements are, which is not just on the premise of indigenous rights, but as First Peoples who actually live here, are buried here, and control the space for as long as history can tell us.
Right. Then we are going to go straight over. Let me big up the people who has arrived. Earl Allen, King of the South, Georgia Dennis. Good evening all and welcome, Ladybug. Thank you for joining. Noreen Dennison. Thank you for joining. Now we're going to listen together to the recent message. Violet Watson, how are you? Lorraine Barrett. We're going to listen together to the recent message. Like and share the live, please. Like and share the live, please, and thank you. Right, let's listen to Chief Curry's recent message. Yvonne Riley.
Good morning. I stand before you today as representative of the Accompong Maroons, a rich indigenous community with over 350 years of history and a deep connection to the land, the island we call Jamaica, the territory known as Cockpit Country. It is with great concern that I address you today, as we the indigenous people who predate the Order in Council 1962 have been overlooked and ignored again, and this time in the constitutional reform process that is currently under the way in Jamaica. The narrative being put out of Accompong Maroons have been that we are separatists and traitors to the state of Jamaica. I would like to make it unequivocally clear that this narrative is completely false and misleading. It is contemptuous, played out narrative which serves to gaslight the public and detract from the important message that needs to be conveyed to the inhabitants of the island we call Jamaica. The current process is flawed on several grounds. Most importantly, the lack of information and contribution from the people. After all, who exactly do we serve as leaders? The Accompong Maroon government has been making every effort to diplomatically communicate with the government of Jamaica, both prior to and during the constitutional reform process, to ensure that Jamaica resolves an age-old issue regarding the Maroon question since 1962, as well as indigenous Maroon land rights. The recent report by the government of Jamaica to the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination stated that there are no indigenous peoples in Jamaica, a statement that is not only false, but deeply disrespectful to the Accompong Maroons and other indigenous peoples of the island. The lack of meaningful dialogue and consultation with us, as outlined in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, is a violation of our rights and a clear example of discrimination. We have a treaty of peace and friendship with the British Crown that has been in force since 1738, and we have never been conquered or colonized. Our rights are enshrined in this treaty, and Clause 4 of the Jamaican Constitution further affirms that this treaty remains in force under the laws of Jamaica. Yet, we have been left out of the conversation when it comes to the future of our island and people. We are not defending the Maroon Treaty to be separate from Jamaican relatives or cause trouble between government-to-government relations. Accompong is defending the treaty because we see an unconscionable effort to remove the indigenous people and culture from the political history of Jamaica and to try and nullify the Maroon Authority under a Republic Jamaica. It also seeks to remove people, many labeled as squatters, from lands due to them based on the tenure and existence of this treaty, whether Maroon or non-Maroon. Such is the power of the 1738 Treaty, which the Crown signed with the Maroons in 1738, remains in force for the born and the unborn. I continue to urge Minister Malahoo Fort and the government of Jamaica to engage in meaningful dialogue with the Akompong Maroons and other indigenous groups on the island. We have valuable insights and perspectives that must be taken into account as you move forward with constitutional reform. We are not asking for special treatment, but rather for recognition and respect that we deserve as original inhabitants of the island. If you leave us out of this constitutional fold of a Republic Jamaica, and we stand on sovereignty as our shield, you will then try to create a narrative to the Jamaican public that we are sympathizers of the British Crown, or somewhat traitors to a system and government that does not want to include Maroons or recognize indigenous rights. This would be considered propaganda and just another colonial tool to divide and conquer. The Maroons want a Republic Jamaica, but we want it to be done correctly. We can work together to create a constitution that truly represents all the people of Jamaica, including the indigenous communities. We must learn from the mistakes of the past and commit to build a future of trust and inclusiveness for all. There are over 40 recommended actions, points required to be addressed by the Jamaican state government before the next session of the United Nations Committee for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. Is Jamaica becoming a state of dishonor and mistrust? Or will it be seen as a state built upon moral principles of accountability within the rule of law? Within the last 24 hours, we saw the Prime Minister of Jamaica publicly conceded that the architecture of a constitution cannot be easily disturbed or changed without consensus from the people and stakeholders. I agree with the Prime Minister on this statement and urge him and his administration to show the Jamaican people the final draft of the constitutional reform document. The Akompong Maroons do not see this process as a joke. This affects the born and the unborn. Let it be clear. The time for action and collaboration is now. Pursuant to the rule of international law that is observed within the family of nations, I urge the Andrew Holness-led administration to not remain in a wrong and strong position on indigenous rights in Jamaica. In solidarity and peace for the people, do the right thing. Thank you.
In peace and solidarity for the people, Andrew Holness, do the right thing. Charnel Williams, how are you? You see, this constitutional reform, my people, we must not take it lightly. Marcia Gray, Verna Timpson, Precious Allen. Look at America's gun law. Look at America's gun law. This is how important rights are. I think it's quite a divisive right because we can all have our opinion on rights and what they are and who should be entitled to them. But gun rights in America is one that a lot of people argued should be changed, should be curtailed, changes should be made to it. But you'd notice government come, government go. Beverly Lawson, they cannot touch it. It is a constitutional right. And when you're given right by constitution or your natural rights, rights at birth, right that are innate to all of us, sometimes we call it common law as well, your common law rights, you must always seek to protect them. It is a reason why you have them. Because the overarching state have tantamount of powers and its department and agencies and players to abuse you, Marcia Esty, to deny you services, to deny you access to education, to healthcare, to justice, among other things. It is why within the constitutional system, you have the different arm of government, but you have an arm of governance within the constitutional system, the judiciary, the judges, the entire court and justice system, that which protects your constitutional right from a tyrannical, despotic or dictator, authoritarian government. So this constitutional reform rather, ought to be taken very serious, because it's your right going forward the moment it is changed to many generations to come. And you should use the American gun law, the American gun rights. You should use that to judge the strength of your constitution, even when the thing may be seen as a danger. The Constitution gives you a right. And none of the operative of the state, neither the judiciary, the legislature, or the executive, they cannot touch that right, because it's the right entrenched in the Constitution. Now, over in Britain here, because we don't have a written constitution like America, or we don't have a, and let me say this before I go further. Jamaica doesn't have a constitution. What Jamaica have, it's an administrative document for the protectorate of, for the British Protectorate of Jamaica. That is the document we have, because that constitution, how you derive the constitution, is after your country goes through a revolution and torn up, then you sit down and you debate, argue, and come to a constitution. It was by how the Americans and the French did it after their revolution. Our constitution given to us is quite much a different thing. It's not the current document we have, it's not a document that the Jamaican people debated and come together on. It was Jamaican elitists that agreed that London Foreign Office Protectorate document. So of course, we need to change that document, but all of us, the people of Jamaica that live on that island, indigenous or not, must be involved in the changes of the constitution, because it is going to affect all of us and our generation going forward. Now, back to Britain and not having, even though written those constitutions and give them to their colony, Britain not having a constitution for itself. So because we don't have a constitution in Britain, we generally don't, how are you? We generally do not have rights. I will explain that further. What we have is freedom. If it's not prohibited by law, then we have a freedom to do it, access it. But the way our governance system is structured in the UK, Parliament can just move in and make whatever it wants in law by a simple vote because it's a parliamentary monarchy. They don't have a constitution. However, during the Tony Blair era, Tony Blair had a constitutional review where he tried to dismantle separation of power to a degree. But as I explained before, in this British system, it is rather difficult to have a total separation of the executive and the legislature while members of the executive are members of the legislature. So that's a difficult tie over in separation of power, which is quite different in the United States, where those branches really do not tie over like that, because you have the legislature, which is separate, you have the executive, which is separate, which that is the president and its secretaries and departments and agencies, and then you have the judiciary, which is separate. But in 2005, in Tony Blair Constitutional Review, what Tony Blair did, because Britain was a signatory to the Human Rights Convention. So what Tony Blair did is made that into British law through the Human Rights Act of 1988, which came into force October 2000. So those were the first time we really had rights in Britain in the sense of the American constitutional term. But those, even though, are not safe rights because of the parliamentary system. And the squabble of that led to Brexit. In the whole debate, we should remove the Human Rights Act because it gives too much power to deportees and asylum seekers and all that. That was one of the major debates, xenophobia tied into it. And thereby, Brenda Elson, Britain came out of Europe on a referendum given by David Cameron. The debate now ongoing is to get rid of the Human Rights Act and introduce a British Bill of Rights. So without a written constitution, your rights or freedom can be very shaky if you have especially a majority parliament that can changes the rules without getting into negotiation and debate with the other side. Our constitution should be changed, must be changed, but the way it has been going about at the moment, it is not the right way. We have a stiff-necked government, a government that doesn't hear or listens, is not the right government to take on such a big generational the rights of generations to come. Because changing what we have now, we must improve it, not decrease it. It must be improved. Otherwise, don't touch what we have. If you're not going to improve it or give us more rights, if you're not going to strengthen the rights we have now and give us more rights, then don't touch it. Marlene Muller, who fought confusion, executive presidency or ceremonial presidency, or do I whistle off the both of them together and create what Marlene Muller, who fought, dreamt of, a hybrid presidency? We don't have money to pay. We've been doing it for the Governor General for how long under this barbaric system? If we're moving away from that system to republic, we don't need to pay a president to do nothing. We want an executive president. The executive president, with his executive duty and the responsibility of international affairs. You can have under the president a prime minister that is responsible for domestic affairs, while our president would go and do all the international negotiation, whatever to be done on the international scene. It's our president that does it. Or we can mimic the American system. We have a president and its cabinet, and then you have our Jamaican parliament that deals with our legislative framework that it's separate to the president and its cabinet. And we strengthen and modernize our judiciary. But to have a ceremonial president to go around cutting ribbon, shaking hand, appointing people, paying them millions, it doesn't really make sense. Jamaica don't have that money to waste. Jamaica don't have that money to waste to pay just for a figurehead. Look how rich America is. America, figurehead, is there to do a job. They're not there at a fashion show. The fashion show president comes from the monarchical system. If we're getting away from the monarchical system, then we must drop all of it. It is a very contention between the prime minister and the leader of the opposition, even though they might go around and make it as if Mark Golden is difficult by not authorizing his team on the review committee to sign off on something that is botched like anything else this Labour government does. You cannot become in a republic and then you still want to stay in the judicial committee of the Privy Council. So what's the point of becoming a republic if we still think the only justice is the white man's justice? What's the point of becoming a republic? We might as well apply to Westminster for full colony, direct rule from Westminster, blue passport, British territorial subject. We might as well apply for that. Or we do a total detachment, as what Mark Golden says, and what I believe in, a total detachment. This is why I'm advising the Jamaican people, under this government, do not accept this referendum. You must vote it down to protect your children, your grandchildren, and your great-great-great-great-grandchildren. Don't let your generation ask the question, where were you when they were doing that to us? All of us have a duty to stand. It is all of us' rights, and it's the rights of all of us generation. All of us have a right to stand against barbarity. All of us have the right to stand against dictatorship. All of us have the right to stand against divide and conquer, because it is what this Prime Minister, Barbados, I don't fully agree with Barbados beat and teach, because Barbados have that chauvinistic presidency where just dead if a shake Hannah cut ribbon, and I don't think taxpayer money, after wasting so much money on the monarchy, I don't think we should be paying somebody else to sit down again. You know what I mean? I think if we're going republic, it should be executive presidency. Nigeria president, French president, South Africa president, all of them president, the Brazil president, all of them people, they are now shake hand, cut ribbon president. They're there to work. Leave. I've been aside, okay, how are you? Master Tom. Leave the thing completely. If we're leaving barbarity completely, then it must be a full U-turn from barbarity. But we can't say, all right, we're going to leave ceremonial barbarity, but we still want to keep judicial barbarity. How much of a sense does that make? This is what I'm trying to say. Me not understand how done can Marlene Malafu who fought be. The thing though is that these people are not willing to listen, nor are they able to take advice. Criticism, the wholeness regime, is one of the greatest teachers. But someone who get flustered by criticism and eat up on herself and go into an awful wallowing tantrum. But criticism and failure, Prime Minister, are the greatest teachers, unless you don't have willpower or ambition, Prime Minister. Because failure, Prime Minister, allow you to try again, allow you to look at it differently, allow you to rethink it, allow you to reapply it, Prime Minister. Criticism, Prime Minister, brutal though some of them may be, are great teachers. Sometimes because we're blinded within ourselves. People way out over yonder outside of us are seeing things that blinded us within us are not seeing. You, Prime Minister, can learn from those criticisms. You can learn from them. You can rethink. You can re-strategize. But oh no, strongman, one-upmanship, deaf ears. It is all what is coming from your inner circle, Andrew Wholeness. Him all for himself, him stubborn, him nah make we yam food, not nah go on for we. I just them alone, things are going for. Everybody attack Andrew Wholeness. Who not say you're thief, them say you're bad mind, them say you're corrupt, them say you're nepotistic, them say you're cronyized, them say you're conflict of interestistic. Everybody attack Andrew. Everybody attack. How much? When last time looking at the Gleaner letter and commentary, Nestor Morgan, you are the government media taboo. You are the government media Panango, when was the last time you read the commentary or the editorial area of the Gleaner? You don't say everybody attack. Everybody attack. It is surprising that Uno sit down so close to it. And everybody attack out in the open. And I don't fancy people are whisper anymore. Attack right side down. Hold away without the mango tree. And all the way attack under the death. I pick mango. And all now no go on like I not hear. But everybody attack. Everybody attack Andrew Holness. Your wife, though, Prime Minister, is your greatest demise. The central executive team saw it. It get to the point, though, where you are so up somewhere of yourself that nobody can get a headway through to you. Therefore, it seems as if they have decided, let the chip fall where they may lie. If he is hell-bent and taking down the party with him, let him. Wrong move, though. Pushing a knife politically is one of the easiest things to do. Especially with such a lame duck government. All it takes is a little leak. But there's so much corruption, though, because one could fairly argue that the Integrity Commission is protecting this Prime Minister. We're not talking about the illicit six. We're not going that far tonight. We are not going as far tonight as the illicit six. We are just talking about the 3 years late running into 4 of the Prime Minister's statutory, unverified statutory declaration, where the same rules that apply to other public officials, such as Dwayne Vaz, does not apply to Andrew Holness. Well, if I'm correct, Dwayne Vaz was late on 1 year, was he not? The Prime Minister is 3 years late running 4. So one could fairly argue that there are corrupt officials at the Integrity Commission, because the Prime Minister ought to be fined, just like Dwayne Vaz, for submitting the required document late. The Prime Minister also, given that the Prime Minister is 3 years plus late, the Prime Minister also should be referred to prosecution. Some may say the Prime Minister was referred for prosecution last year, February, and within less than 24 hours, the Prime Minister was vindicated or given mercy from prosecution. So one could really argue just on that alone, Andrew desperate to turn presidency, but it would be the last of Jamaica on here. It would be the last of Jamaica as we know it. it would be the loss of Jamaica as we know it. But we cannot allow this man to rip up our rights, given the attacks on our freedoms and on our rights that we've seen, how the Prime Minister has used state of emergency and Zozo in their lack of crime policy and planning, how the Prime Minister abused our legislative process, how the Prime Minister abused the scrutinization process of our Parliament by putting JLP MP at the head of standing committees in Parliament. Generally, in the Westminster system, it is not so. Parliamentary committee are normally chaired by backbench MPs, rebels, not people who support the government, rebels. The abuse of the accountability, the electoral and policing process, where he took both independent organization into his office. Firstly, the Electoral Commission of Jamaica. And then in his aim to dismantle the office of the political ombudsman, the Prime Minister ramrayed again through our legislative process in order to take that department into the office of the Prime Minister by merging it into the Electoral Commission of Jamaica, which these two bodies serves two different processes. The Electoral Commission administrate, regulate, and adjudicate our electoral process. The office of the political ombudsman is the public's police when it comes to the government and all public officials. When they fail to deliver services that they ought to deliver to us, when they are involved in blatant malpractice and corruption, we can have them investigated by that public accountability body which holds them to account. The Prime Minister has managed to subsume those together and take a hold of those into his office. With all of that being said, will you allow this same government, this same Prime Minister, to rip up what you have in your constitution as fundamental right? Your right to a fair jury trial, as we have seen ruled in the Privy Council in the Vibes Cartel case just recently. So if them are rip it up, we want better. We don't want wassara. We don't want weaker. We don't want shakier. We want better and stronger. I want to thank you all for being here with me, my tired soul, tonight. But we are going to continue to develop on this subject. It ought to be the headline going forward, because this is a lifetime change if it happens. And because it is a lifetime change, if it's not being done the correct way, we, the people, have a duty to vote it down. Thank you very much for being here tonight on The People's Point of View. Join us back tomorrow for your At a Glance program from the West Midlands. because we probably go there till about Sunday, you see. So, yes, if you don't hit the like button yet, hit it before me start quarrel. Hit the like button before me start wail and wallow over the little likes. But thank you all tonight for being here. Us back tomorrow when we continue our conversation. Walk good, everyone. Thank you, Ladybug. Walk good, everyone. Have a great night, a great evening, and we will definitely see you here tomorrow. Good night from Global Television.